many great performance V8 engines from the golden muscle car era: the Chrysler 426 Hemi, Chevrolet LS6 454, Pontiac 455 HO, Buick Stage-1 455, and Ford 427 V8 are just a few of the great V8 motors from this original muscle car time period. With so many great performance engines produced during this era, many good V8 motors have fallen through the cracks. Some of them, it's understandable why they have been forgotten, for they weren't true performance motors. But there are some that provided a lot of performance punch, but have been forgotten over time due to the shadows cast by their larger displacement high-performance siblings. This is the list of the top 5 unsung muscle car V8 engines from the original muscle car era. The Ford K-Code Hypo 289 V8. It's easy to see how Ford's fantastic small block K-Code 289 cubic inch V8 got lost in the fray and has been forgotten by many. With most muscle car fans focusing on classic Ford cars powered by Ford's big block 429, 428, 427, and 390 cubic inch V8s, there's just no room for love for the K-Code. Add to that the 1969 to 1970 small block Boss 302 cubic inch V8 took away what little attention the K-Code had. Don't let the lack of love fool you. The K-Code was one of the best performance V8s Ford produced during the 1960s. It produced a whopping 271 gross horsepower and started off life as a late 1963 Fairlane engine option. It was the Mustang's high-performance engine option from 1964 and a half through 1967. The K-Code, just like the standard 289, had a large 4-inch bore and a small 2.87-inch stroke. The K-Code had solid lifters, a hot cam, a 10.5-to-1 compression ratio, performance exhaust manifolds, and a 600 CFM Autolite carburetor. The K-Code also powered the 1965 to 1967 Shelby GT350 and all Shelby Cobra 289 models. On these cars, Shelby tweaked the K-Code to provide 306 gross horsepower. A 1966 Shelby Mustang GT350 went 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.7 seconds and the quarter mile in 14.5 seconds at 98 miles per hour. Shelby also offered in 1966 and 1967 a supercharged version of the K-Code, which kicked out an incredible 390 gross horsepower. The nickname given to the K-Code back in its day was Hypo, which stood for high performance. Indeed, that's exactly what it was. Even though the K-Code may have been forgotten by many for decades, K-Code equipped Fords are now very sought after by car collectors. The Chrysler 340 V8. Now here's a motor that gets the Rodney Dangerfield no respect treatment. Chrysler may have produced the motor, but had little interest in promoting it. The Chrysler 340 was released for the 1968 model year and stayed around until the end of the 1973 model year. When it was first released, it was the perfect sleeper. It had a 275 gross horsepower rating from its inception until the end of the 1971 model year. For 1972 and 1973, the 340 was detuned to run on unleaded fuel and its power output dropped to 240 net horsepower. It was the 1968 to 1971 340 which gave those who didn't have the big bucks for the large displacement muscle cars a chance to still compete. The 1968 to 1971 340's true horsepower rating was a little over 300 gross horsepower. What made the 340 so potent was it was a lightweight, small block V8, which was part of the super reliable Chrysler LA Series V8 engine family. It was overshadowed by Chrysler's 426 Hemi, 440, and 383. Those were all big block V8s, which were available in most of Chrysler's muscle car offerings. But don't let that fool you. There were plenty of 340 equipped Mopar muscle cars that put to shame 383 powered Mopars and other large displacement muscle cars. Not to mention, a 340 had a great weight advantage over its big block brothers that allowed for improved handling. It had a large 4.04-inch bore and 3.31-inch stroke. The 340 had a 10.5-to-1 compression ratio, free flow heads, and a Carter AVS 4-barrel carburetor. For 1971, Chrysler dropped the compression ratio from 10.5-to-1 to 10.3-to-1. However, it now had J-heads and a new higher flow Carter thermoquad 4-barrel carburetor to compensate. The end result was the 1971 340 was the most powerful of the 1968 to 1971 340 V8s. The rumored true output was around 325 gross horsepower. Still not convinced the 340 is a diamond in the rough? Hot Rod Magazine tested a factory stock 340 powered 1971 Dodge Challenger and obtained a 14.18 second quarter mile time. As a comparison, Super Street Cars magazine tested a 1971 Dodge Challenger equipped with a 390 horsepower 6-pack 440 V8 and obtained a 14.1 second quarter mile time. 1968 to 1971 340 powered Mopar muscle cars are still very affordable compared to most classic muscle cars, yet they yield fantastic performance. The Pontiac 350 HO V8. Mention the Pontiac 350 cubic inch V8 in conversation, and most people will say, "What?" The confusion is understandable since the Pontiac 350 is Pontiac's forgotten V8 motor. If the Pontiac 350 is mentioned in passing conversation, it's usually concerning the 1974 GTO. The Pontiac 350 was the GTO's sole power plant for that model year. Everyone is familiar with Pontiac's legendary performance V8s, the 389, 400, 421, 428, and 455 cubic inch V8s, but not the 350. The 350 was first introduced for the 1968 model year. It had a 3.875-inch bore and a 3.75-inch stroke. However, it's the high output or HO version of this motor that was a true performance motor, only offered in a few Pontiac models including the Firebird. For 1968, the 350 HO, which was equipped with a Rochester Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor, produced a very healthy 320 gross horsepower. For 1969, gross horsepower increased to 325 due to the addition of new high-performance heads and a camshaft taken right out of Pontiac's Ram Air 3 400. The 1969 350 HO's compression ratio was 10.5-to-1. The 1969 350 HO was capable of mid-14-second quarter-mile times in the Firebird, Tempest, and Le Mans. It only takes a little tweaking to drop the 1969 350 HO's quarter-mile time into the 13s. The Oldsmobile Ramrod W-31 350 V8. During the original muscle car era, Oldsmobile became known for its high-performance 400 and 455 cubic inch big block V8s. Oldsmobile's small block V8 offerings were relegated to duty in Oldsmobile's more pedestrian cars. The main exception was when Oldsmobile released a high-performance small block 350 cubic inch V8 for the 1968 model year called the Ramrod 350, or better known as the W-31. It was offered exclusively in Oldsmobile Cutlass and F85 models from 1968 to 1970. It sold in very small numbers during this 3 model year run. For 1968 and 1969, most W31 Cutlass models were understated and looked like any plain vanilla two-door Cutlass and not the flashy muscle car Cutlass-based 442. By 1970, that had changed. The W31 had most of the exterior styling cues and racing stripes found on the 442. The 1968 to 1970 W31 equipped Cutlass models all had ram air induction. The 1970 was the only W31 model that had functional twin hood scoops, while the other W31s had air inlets below the front bumper. The W31 produced 325 gross horsepower and had a 10.5 to 1 compression ratio. It had a 4.057 inch bore and a 3.385 inch stroke. The W31 had a high-performance cam and a performance calibrated Rochester Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor. The W31 used the same heads and exhaust manifolds as the other Oldsmobile 350 engines from the same model years. For 1970, an aluminum intake manifold replaced the cast iron intake manifold used on the 1968 to 1969 W31 cars. A 1970 W31 powered Cutlass was tested by Popular Hot Rodding magazine. It obtained a 14.62 second quarter-mile time. With performance like this, there's no doubt the W31 was a genuine muscle car engine. The Chevrolet L79 327 V8. Among unsung muscle car engines, the Chevrolet L79 327 cubic inch V8 has become the most well-known by muscle car fans and collectors in the last 2 decades. The L79 327 was produced from the 1965 model year through the 1968 model year. The L79 wasn't the most powerful small block Chevrolet V8 or even the most powerful 327 V8 ever produced. However, it was the 327 V8 which gave true high-performance power to the people. It powered many different Chevrolet models from 1965 through 1968. It was even available on the Corvette during this time period. It was never the Corvette's top engine option, but it did provide plenty of punch. The reason the L79 made this list was Chevrolet didn't promote this engine. It treated it as just a very slight performance upgrade from its base 327 V8. As an example, bear in mind the hoopla may have been all about the 375 horsepower big block L78 396 cubic inch V8 equipped Chevrolet Chevelle SS during this era. But those cars were too pricey for most performance buyers. A buyer, however, could get a Chevelle with a 350 horsepower L79 327 for less than $3,000, which was a heck of a lot of performance for the money. For the last 2 model years of the L79, it was rated in some applications at 325 horsepower instead of 350 horsepower. The horsepower drop was just Chevrolet fudging the numbers for marketing reasons. The L79 still made 350 gross horsepower even when the factory rating was 325 gross horsepower. The L79 had an 11.0 to 1 compression ratio, a high-performance hydraulic camshaft, high compression pistons, and a 600 CFM Holley 4-barrel carburetor. For the 1968 model year, the Holley was replaced by a 750 CFM Rochester Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor. The L79 equipped cars are capable of breaking into the 14-second range in the quarter mile. But that's not what makes the L79 so special. It's how easy and cheap it is to modify the L79 to break into the 13 or 12-second quarter mile time range.